Say goodbye to the fish, Dad, my son Nathan whispered as he shoved me off the fishing boat into the freezing waters of Lake Tahoe. His wife Melissa just stood there smiling, watching me hit the water. Their plan was simple: steal my $18 million and let me drown. But when they got back to shore that evening, I was sitting in my workshop with a very special surprise waiting for them. My name is Carl Douglas. I'm 61 years old, and up until that Tuesday morning, I thought I knew what family meant. Let me back up and tell you how a perfectly normal fishing trip turned into attempted murder. I should have seen the warning signs, but at my age, you start believing that blood still means something, that your own son wouldn't try to kill you for money. The morning started with Nathan calling me directly, first red flag right there. He usually had Melissa handle family stuff. Dad, let's go fishing like we used to, he said. Just you and me on the lake. I've been thinking about Mom a lot lately, and I know you have too. I'd been struggling since my wife Linda passed 3 years ago. The house felt too empty, and honestly, I was desperate for any sign that my son still wanted me around. Since I sold my engineering consulting firm and retired 2 years back, things had felt different between us, colder. So I packed my tackle box, the same weathered Plano box I'd had since Nathan was 10 minus, and drove my pickup out to the Tahoe Keys Marina. Nathan had rented a nice 22-foot Ranger base boat. Nothing fancy, but decent enough for the deep waters. He was waiting at slip 47 with Melissa, which surprised me since she usually avoided anything that might mess up her manicure. Thought you might want some company, she said with that sharp smile of hers, the one that never quite reached her eyes. She was holding a stainless steel thermos of coffee and acting unusually helpful, even offering to carry my gear. The first hour was pleasant enough. We trolled the North Shore near Crystal Bay, where the water drops off fast into the deep blue. I'd taught Nathan to fish these same waters when he was a kid, back when he actually listened to what I had to say. I caught a nice 3-pound largemouth on a chartreuse spinnerbait, and for a moment it felt like old times. But then Nathan started asking questions about my will, my accounts, whether I'd considered simplifying things for them. He was trying to sound casual, but there was something rehearsed about it. Dad, probate can be so complicated, he said, refilling my coffee cup from that thermos. Melissa's been reading about it for her MBA classes. Maybe we should review your estate planning, make sure everything's streamlined. That's when I noticed Melissa filming with her phone. Not obviously, but angling it to capture me drinking, talking about financial stuff, building some kind of evidence. She thought she was being clever, but 20 years in the Navy teaches you to notice things. The pieces clicked together fast, and this whole situation stank like week-old fish. I set down my rod and looked around. We were in deep water, maybe 400 feet, about 2 miles from shore. No other boats in sight, just the 3 of us and whatever plan they'd cooked up. Nathan, I said carefully, setting down my coffee cup, I think I'm ready to head back. Actually, Dad, that's not going to happen. His voice changed completely, harder. The son I'd raised was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. We need to talk about your memory issues. My mind was sharper than it had been in years. Hell, I just designed and built a new workbench in my shop last month, measuring everything to the 16th of an inch. You've been showing signs of dementia, Melissa added, stepping closer with that phone still recording. We have it documented. The doctors agree you're not capable of managing your finances anymore. I realized how carefully they'd set this up. The boat was positioned perfectly minus deep water, no witnesses, far enough from the marina that no one would hear anything. They'd planned this down to the last detail. We're trying to help you, Dad, Nathan said, but his eyes were cold as a January morning. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting but my mind crystal clear. Navy training kicked in, assess the threat, evaluate options, prepare for action, and if I refuse, that's when Melissa smiled for real, the mask finally slipping completely. Elderly man, recent heart episode. Probably took too many medications, got confused on the boat. Tragic accidents happen all the time on these deep lakes. I'd raised this boy from diapers, taught him to tie his shoes, ride a bike, drive a car, paid for his college at UC Davis, his wedding to this woman, and even covered the debts from his failed tech startup last year. And now he was nodding along while his wife threatened my life over money. You're both insane if you think you'll get away with this. Actually, Dad, we've planned this pretty carefully. Nathan pulled out a manila folder from under the seat. Your signature here, transferring all assets to us immediately for your own protection, and we all go home happy. Or, I looked at the legal documents, at my son's expectant face, at Melissa's phone still recording everything. Then I looked at the deep, cold water of Lake Tahoe, 1,645 feet deep in some spots, cold enough to stop a man's heart in minutes. Go to hell, I said. That's when Melissa moved behind me with practiced ease. The push wasn't violent. They were too smart for that. Too calculated. Just a sudden firm shove when I was off balance near the gunwale, looking out at the water. Over I went, jacket and all, into the shocking cold of Lake Tahoe. As I hit the water, I heard Nathan shouting, "Dad, oh God, Dad," putting on a show for that phone camera. But I also heard Melissa's voice, lower, talking to someone on her phone. "Yes, file the emergency petition first thing Monday morning. He's clearly incompetent." The water was brutal, maybe 55 degrees even in late summer. But 20 years in the Navy had taught me a few things about survival in cold water. I kicked off my boots immediately. Waterlogged leather would drag me down fast. My jacket was heavier, but it had air trapped in it that might help with buoyancy if I could manage it right. I broke the surface gasping, just in time to see the Ranger boat speeding away toward shore. They were actually leaving me to die in 400 feet of freezing water. The bastards didn't even look back. That's when I spotted the charter boat about 300 yards away, a white 28-footer with Lucky Strike painted on the transom. Captain Wade Parker turned out to be exactly the kind of man who'd risk his boat to save a drowning stranger. 62 years old, weathered from decades on the water, and wearing a faded Navy ball cap that told me everything I needed to know about his character. "Holy hell, what happened to you?" he shouted as he and his teenage grandson pulled me aboard their boat. I was shivering so hard I could barely speak, my teeth chattering like castanets. Wade wrapped me in a thick wool blanket that smelled of diesel and coffee while his grandson Tyler fired up the twin Mercs. "Sir, you need to get to a hospital. Hypothermia is nothing to mess with. My family I manage between chatters, the boat." "We saw them take off like their pants were on fire," Wade said grimly, studying my face. "What kind of people leave someone floating in the middle of Tahoe? The kind who inherit $18 million if I'm not around to stop them," I thought. But out loud I just said, "The kind who aren't really family." Wade reached for his marine radio, but I grabbed his arm with what strength I had left. "Please don't let them know you found me. Not yet." Wade studied my face with the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen enough of life to recognize when something wasn't right. The Navy insignia on his cap caught my attention, submarine service just like my brother had been. "You in some kind of danger, shipmate?" "Yeah, but not the kind you're thinking. I need to get to shore without anyone knowing I survived. Can you help me?" Wade looked at his grandson Tyler, then back at me. The kid was maybe 17, tall and gangly, with that earnest look young men get when they're trying to figure out if the adults know what they're doing. "Grandpa, shouldn't we call the Coast Guard?" Tyler asked. Concerned, "Sometimes doing right doesn't look like following the rules," Wade said slowly. He keyed the radio again. "Coast Guard, this is Lucky Strike." False's alarm on that rescue call turned out to be debris in the water. All clear. As we headed toward a small private dock Wade knew in a hidden cove near Emerald Bay, I told him everything. About Nathan and Melissa, about the money, about the documents they'd wanted me to sign. Wade listened without interrupting, his expression getting darker with each detail. "So they figured they'd rather be rich orphans than broke kids with a living father," Wade said when I finished. "Apparently so. What are you going to do now?" That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? I was officially dead as far as Nathan and Melissa knew. They'd head back to the marina, call the authorities, report me missing overboard, play the grieving family while executing whatever legal documents they'd prepared. But being dead gives you options you don't have while alive. Options I'd never considered before today. "I'm going to let them think they won," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Then I'm going to destroy them." Wade grinned for the first time since pulling me from the water. "Now that sounds like a plan worth helping with." The cove Wade knew was tucked behind a stand of pine trees, invisible from the main lake. His friend Patricia Coleman ran a small bed and breakfast there. One of those off-the-grid places that didn't ask too many questions. She was a tough-looking woman in her 70s who took one look at my bedraggled state and immediately started heating soup. "Honey, I've been running this place for 30 years, she said, ladling chicken broth into a bowl while I sat wrapped in blankets in her kitchen. "I've seen people running from all kinds of things. Long as you're not bringing violence to my door, you're welcome to stay." That evening, while Nathan and Melissa were presumably filing police reports about their tragically missing father, I sat in Patricia's kitchen planning their downfall. Wade agreed to be my eyes and ears around the marina. Charter boat captains hear everything, and nobody pays attention to them. But I needed professional help, someone who understood investigation work. That's when I remembered Troy Sullivan from the VFW post in Carson City. Former Marine, ran a private investigation business now and had the kind of background that might be useful for what I had in mind. I used Patricia's landline to call him, keeping it brief. "Troy, it's Carl Douglas. I need your help with something sensitive." "Carl, thought you retired up to Tahoe." What kind of help? The kind where my family just tried to kill me, and I need to prove it before they succeed next time. There was a long pause. Jesus, Carl, you serious? Dead serious. Can you get up here tomorrow? I'll leave tonight. Troy Sullivan was worth every penny I'd paid him over the years for various security consultations. Within 48 hours of arriving at Patricia's place, he had more information about Nathan and Melissa's activities than I'd gathered in months of living near them. Your son's been very busy since you died, Troy said, spreading photographs across Patricia's kitchen table on Thursday morning. Multiple lawyer meetings, 3 bank visits, and 4 separate trips to a private medical facility outside Carson City. He pointed to a surveillance photo of Nathan and Melissa entering a modern glass building. Whitmore Reproductive Services, very exclusive, very expensive, and very discreet. They specialize in surrogacy arrangements for wealthy clients who want to maintain privacy. The pieces were clicking together in my head, forming a picture I didn't like. They bought a baby. Looks like it. According to my contact at Whitmore, the arrangements were made 8 months ago. Cash payment, pre-prepared birth certificate, specific instructions to have everything ready for immediate pickup. Troy pulled out another photo, a woman in her 40s with short auburn hair and an expensive briefcase, shaking hands with Nathan outside a law office in Reno. Meet Victoria Sterling, he continued, partner at Sterling Associates. She specializes in what she calls family transition planning for elderly clients with complicated family relationships. I stared at the photo, recognition hitting me like a cold wave. I met her about 8 months ago at some charity function Nathan dragged me to. She was very interested in my estate planning, kept asking detailed questions about my trust structures and family dynamics. I'll bet she was, Troy said grimly, because Victoria Sterling has a very specific business model. She identifies elderly clients with substantial assets and strained family relationships, then helps the families accelerate their inheritance through what she calls compassionate intervention. You mean murder. I mean, she creates legal frameworks that allow families to take control of assets while the elderly person is still alive, using claims of incompetence, dementia, or diminished capacity. She's done it at least 14 times in the past 3 years. Troy spread out more photos across Patricia's kitchen table. Surveillance shots of Victoria Sterling meeting with different families, entering various law offices, visiting what appeared to be private medical facilities. She's running a whole operation, he continued, finds wealthy elderly people with greedy relatives, helps orchestrate evidence of mental decline, provides legal cover for asset transfers, and takes a substantial cut of the inheritance. And if the elderly person refuses to cooperate or gets suspicious, they have accidents. I finished. Boating mishaps, falls downstairs, medication overdoses. Always tragic, always plausibly accidental, and always financially convenient for the surviving family. Patricia had been listening from the stove, her face getting paler with each revelation. How many people has she killed? That I can prove? None yet, that I suspect. At least a dozen over the past 3 years. She's very good at covering her tracks, and she only works with families who can provide plausible alternative explanations for their relatives' deaths. The full scope of what Nathan and Melissa had gotten involved in was becoming clear, and it made my stomach turn. This wasn't just about my money. It was about a systematic operation targeting vulnerable seniors. We have to stop her, I said. We will, but first we need to understand exactly what your son and daughter-in-law have already put in motion. Because according to my sources, they filed preliminary probate documents yesterday morning. Troy pulled out a legal folder. They're claiming you died intestate without a valid will, which would make them your sole heirs. They're also claiming that any existing estate planning documents are invalid because they were signed while you were mentally incompetent. But I have a will, a very specific detailed will that was updated just 18 months ago. I know, I found it. Troy opened the folder and pulled out what looked like my will, complete with my signature. But the text was completely different from what I remembered signing. They replaced it, I said, scanning the forged document. This version left everything to Nathan, with special provisions for any future children he might have minus including the baby they'd just acquired through Whitmore Reproductive Services. I stood up and walked to Patricia's window overlooking the lake. 3 days ago, I'd been a retired engineer trying to maintain a relationship with my only family. Now I was discovering that my son was part of a criminal enterprise that had murdered at least a dozen elderly people for their money. There's something else, Troy said quietly, about the baby. I turned back to face him. What about her? The birth mother was a 19-year-old girl named Amanda Rodriguez. Run away from Phoenix, no family, no support system. Victoria Sterling found her at a shelter in Reno and offered her $75,000 to carry a baby for a loving couple who couldn't have children. Where is she now? Troy's expression was grim. According to the medical records, she died from complications during delivery. But I spoke to a nurse at Whitmore who remembers Amanda. Healthy girl, no risk factors, normal pregnancy right up until the day she gave birth. The implication hung in the air like smoke from a campfire. They killed her. I think so, but I can't prove it yet. What I can prove is that your son and daughter-in-law are part of a criminal organization that's been systematically murdering elderly people for their money. And tomorrow morning, they're meeting with Victoria Sterling to finalize the legal transfer of your assets. I sat back down, my mind racing through possibilities. Where Sterling's office in Carson City, 10 a.m. I looked at Patricia, then at Troy, then at the photos spread across the table showing my son shaking hands with a professional killer. Then I guess it's time for Carl Douglas to rise from the dead. The hardest part about planning your return from the dead is deciding which audience gets the shock first. I could confront Nathan and Melissa privately, giving them a chance to explain themselves, but that assumed that they deserved an explanation. Or I could make my resurrection public, letting them discover I was alive the same way the rest of the world would. I chose option 3, strategic haunting. You want a what? Troy asked when I explained my plan. I want them to know I'm alive, but not know how much I know about their operation. I want them scared, off balance, making mistakes. Patricia nodded approvingly. Psychological warfare. I like it. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. While Nathan, Melissa, and Victoria Sterling were in their downtown meeting dividing up my assets, I would be making my presence known in more subtle ways. Troy had discovered that they were keeping the baby at my old house, the 4-bedroom ranch in South Lake Tahoe that I'd signed over to Nathan last year because I thought downsizing to a condo would be simpler. They'd hired a private nurse named Carol Peterson to care for the infant during the day, a woman who'd been recruited through one of Sterling's front companies. Carol's a good person, Troy assured me after running a background check, single mom, nursing degree from UNR, clean record. She probably thinks she's helping a legitimate family with childcare, then she deserves to know the truth. That Friday morning, while Nathan and Melissa were in Carson City legally erasing me from existence, I stood on the front porch of my former home and rang the doorbell. The house looked different, new landscaping, expensive outdoor furniture, a Mercedes SUV in the driveway that definitely hadn't been there when I lived here. Carol Peterson was younger than I'd expected, maybe 32 with tired eyes and genuine warmth. She opened the door holding a baby bottle and wearing scrubs covered with cartoon bears. "Can I help you?" she asked politely. "Hello, Carol. My name is Carl Douglas. I believe you're caring for my granddaughter." The color drained from her face completely. She knew that name. It had been all over the local news for the past 4 days. The retired Boeing engineer who died in a boating accident on Lake Tahoe. You're dead?" she stammered. It was in the papers on the news. "Your son said." "My son said a lot of things, apparently. Not all of them true." I smiled gently. "May I come in? I think we need to talk." Carol stepped back, still staring at me like I was actually a ghost. "But you died. The accident. They've been grieving." I've been reading about that fascinating story, though not entirely accurate. I followed her into the living room, my former living room, where a baby sat in an expensive bouncy seat, gurgling contentedly. The sight of her took my breath away. She was perfect, maybe 3 weeks old, with dark hair and serious brown eyes that seemed to look right through you. She was wearing a pink outfit that probably cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week, and the room around her was filled with high-end baby equipment. "What's her name?" I asked, settling into a chair beside the bouncy seat. "Baby Douglas," Carol said automatically, then caught herself. I mean, they said they were going to name her Emma, after Nathan's grandmother, but they haven't decided for sure. "They haven't decided because they don't know her well enough to name her," I said softly. "Because she's not really their baby, is she?" Carol sat down heavily on the sofa, still holding the baby bottle. "I don't understand what's happening. You're supposed to be dead. And Nathan and Melissa, they're supposed to be grieving parents who needed help with their newborn." I pulled out the photos Troy had taken, the documents I'd copied, the evidence of Victoria Sterling's criminal operation. I showed Carol everything, watching her expression shift from disbelief to horror as the scope of the conspiracy became clear. "The teenage girl who gave birth to this baby was named Amanda Rodriguez," I said gently. "She was 19 years old with no family, no support system. They told her she was helping a loving couple who couldn't have children. She died during delivery under suspicious circumstances." Carol was crying now, looking at the baby with new understanding. "She's an orphan?" "Yes. And if Nathan and Melissa get away with this, she'll grow up thinking they're her parents, never knowing her real mother died to give her life. What do you want me to do? I want you to help me make sure this baby grows up knowing the truth about where she came from. Her name should be Emma Amanda Douglas. Emma for the name they chose, Amanda for her birth mother." I spent an hour with Carol and baby Emma, taking photos, documenting everything in my former home, explaining what would happen next. Carol agreed to continue caring for Emma while secretly gathering evidence and keeping me informed about Nathan and Melissa's activities. They'll be back around noon, she told me as I prepared to leave. They always come home after their business meetings to check on her and make phone calls. Perfect. By then, they'll have received my first message. While I'd been talking to Carol, Troy had been busy in Carson City. He'd parked across from Victoria Sterling's office building with a telephoto lens, documenting Nathan and Melissa entering the building, meeting with Sterling, shaking hands over what they thought was my death certificate. But the real surprise was what Wade delivered to their lawyer's office at exactly 11:47 a.m. while they were still in Sterling's office. I'd written a simple note on Patricia's best stationery. Dear Nathan and Melissa, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. We need to talk, love, Dad. P.S. Give my regards to little Emma Amanda. She's beautiful. According to Troy, who watched from across the street, all three of them came running out of the building within minutes of receiving the note, their faces white with panic. The psychological warfare had begun. That afternoon, when they returned to my former house expecting to find their comfortable conspiracy intact, I was sitting in my old workshop chair, the oak one I'd built myself 15 years ago for retirement projects that never seemed to end. Hello, Nathan, I said when he walked through the garage door. How was your meeting with Victoria Sterling? Melissa screamed from behind him, actually screamed like she'd seen her worst nightmare, which I suppose she had. Nathan just stood there with his mouth hanging open, still holding his car keys. Surprised, I have to say, the reports of my death were terribly premature, though I did enjoy reading my obituary. Very touching stuff about my declining mental state. Carol appeared from the house carrying Emma, just as we'd planned. She'd been waiting to witness whatever happened next. Mr. Douglas asked me to bring Emma out, Carol said nervously. He wanted to meet his granddaughter properly. Her name isn't Emma Amanda. Melissa snapped, some of her composure returning. Her name is whatever we decide because she's our daughter. Is she? I stood up slowly, accepting Emma from Carol. Tell me, Melissa, when exactly did you give birth? Because 4 days ago on that boat, you certainly didn't look like someone who delivered a baby 3 weeks earlier. The silence in my workshop was deafening except for Emma's soft breathing. The birth was private, Melissa said weakly. Yes, I'm sure it was very private indeed. So private that the actual mother died during delivery under mysterious circumstances. I looked at both of them. Did you know her name was Amanda Rodriguez? 19 years old from Phoenix. No family to ask questions when she disappeared. Nathan found his voice. That's impossible. We would never what? Never conspire with Victoria Sterling to run an illegal baby trafficking operation. Never systematically destroy an elderly man's reputation to steal his fortune. Never push your own father off a boat and leave him for dead. I walked over to my workbench where I'd laid out all the evidence. Which part exactly would you never do? Melissa recovered first. Prove it. You can make all the accusations you want, but proving any of it is another matter. Oh, sweetheart, I said, smiling for the first time since they'd arrived. You really shouldn't have said that. I pulled out the digital recorder I'd been carrying, military grade, the kind that picks up whispers from across a room. I've been recording this entire conversation, every word, every admission, and yes, it's completely legal with one-party consent. That's when Nathan and Melissa made their final mistake. Instead of confessing, instead of showing even a hint of remorse, they decided to double down. They spent that night making desperate phone calls to Victoria Sterling and someone they kept referring to as the cleaner. But Troy had been monitoring their communications. By dawn Saturday, Agent Michelle Garcia and her FBI team were setting up surveillance around the house. The Bureau had been tracking Sterling's operation for 2 years, waiting for exactly this kind of break. The takedown happened at 2 p.m. Victoria Sterling arrived with her hired muscle, planning to question me before arranging my permanent disappearance. What she found instead was Agent Garcia and a full tactical team. I was wearing a wire when Sterling walked into my workshop, calm as you please, and sat down like we were discussing insurance policies. Mr. Douglas, she said pleasantly, opening her leather portfolio, you've caused quite a bit of trouble for my organization. Murder tends to do that. She smiled that cold professional smile. I prefer to think of what we do as estate planning acceleration, helping families access inheritances that would otherwise be tied up in lengthy probate proceedings. And the elderly people you kill. What service do you provide them? Peace. An end to the confusion and fear that comes with age-related decline. A dignified death that allows their families to remember them as they were. I stared at this woman calmly discussing mass murder like quarterly earnings reports. How many people have you killed? She consulted her notes as if checking appointment schedules. Over the past 3 years, my clients and I have successfully resolved 14 cases involving elderly individuals whose continued existence was creating hardship for their families. And you're planning to make me number 15? Unfortunately, yes. And the baby will need to have an accident as well. Carbon monoxide leak, perhaps. These old houses can be so dangerous. That's when Agent Garcia and her team came through every door simultaneously. They'd heard Sterling confess to 14 murders while planning 2 more, all recorded on federal equipment. Nathan got 18 years, Melissa got 15, and Victoria Sterling received life without parole. The investigation uncovered her entire network, corrupt medical examiners, probate lawyers, and family members across 3 states who'd participated in the systematic murder of elderly people for their inheritances. But the most important outcome was Amanda. I legally adopted her with the full support of Amanda Rodriguez's family, who were located in Phoenix. They were grateful that someone would raise Amanda's daughter and tell her the truth about her brave young mother. I'm 66 now, 5 years later, and Amanda is an incredible little girl who knows exactly who she is and where she came from. She knows her birth mother was a teenager named Amanda who wanted her to have a good life. She knows the people who claimed to be her parents tried to use her in a scheme that cost Amanda her life. Every month we visit Amanda's grave in Phoenix with flowers Emma picks herself. We tell Amanda about how smart Emma is, how she's learning to read, how she builds things in my workshop with tools scaled down to her size. I'm teaching her woodworking just like I taught Nathan when he was young, except Emma actually listens. Wade still runs his charter boat business and has become something of a local legend for pulling dead grandfathers out of Lake Tahoe. Patricia expanded her bed and breakfast into a refuge for elderly people escaping family abuse. Troy opened a specialized investigation firm focusing on elder abuse cases. Nathan writes me letters, sometimes from prison, trying to explain why he did what he did, asking for forgiveness, claiming he was manipulated by people smarter than him. I read them, then filed them away. Maybe someday Emma will want to understand what happened to the people who bought her as a baby. Maybe not. Because here's what I learned during my week as a dead man. Family isn't about blood or inheritance or obligation. It's about showing up when someone needs you, protecting people who can't protect themselves, and choosing love over greed every single day. Emma, Amanda, and I have that kind of family now. The kind where nobody gets pushed off boats, nobody steals trust funds, and nobody has to die for someone else to get rich. Every morning she climbs into my lap while I drink coffee and tells me about her dreams. Every evening we work on projects in the shop, a dollhouse, a bird feeder, a bookshelf for her room. It's a much better family than the one I was born into, and definitely better than the one I raised. Sometimes the family you choose is the only family that matters. The most dangerous betrayal doesn't come from strangers in dark alleys. It comes from people who know exactly how much you love them and use that love as a weapon against you.